you with us. A very warm welcome. This is the Coaching Hour. My name is Paul Rotherham, and I'm joined once again by my two lovely partners, business partners in the form of Mary and Mareka, as this podcast is brought to you in partnership with Coaches Network South Africa. If you are currently watching on Facebook, an especially warm welcome to you. Nice to have you here, as this is the live version. If you're listening to this or watching this afterwards, it'll be just as good, I promise. Nice to have you here for the ride. For the next 25, 30 minutes or so, we'll be chatting all things coaching, but with a specific focus on, here's Mareka to tell you.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, nurturing your child's true nature. We have Michelle Bennetts again as guest. Welcome, Michelle. It's so nice to have you again with us. Michelle is an ILS master coach, Enneagram Facilitator, leadership development coach, and not just another speaker, but also a transformational powerhouse. So nice to have you, Michelle.
Thank you, Mareka. Thank you, Paul, for the warm welcome, and Mary for having me back.
Yes, it's always nice to have you. Last time we spoke about the Enneagram. Today we want to focus a bit more on, the children part of it, which I'm very, interested in, looking at my kids, having one teenager and a younger daughter, and they are complete opposites from one another. So Michelle, why did you choose this topic for today's?
Well, it's been something that's been on my heart for the last few years. I've been working with South African schools, parents and teenagers late into kind of mid to late high school and early college for the last few years, which is really a passion project of mine because, all of the stuff that they learn in school is all kind of theory, but they aren't the skills that have that readiness to go into the world. And I've often had parents that kind of like throw their kid at me and go, coach this kid, like get this kid sorted out. And the first thing I need to do is say to the parents, sit down, relax, and enjoy the flight, because where I'm going to start is with you. So to that topic that we agreed upon around nurturing our child, what I really wanted to talk about, which was such a massive lesson for me with my own son, my eldest son, is for us to nurture our children, we as parents first need to be very self-aware about who we are, where we're at, and what we're actually projecting onto our children. So we as individuals have a certain set of values. If I'm the kind of person that just wants everything perfect and everything must be in its way, I expect my child to reflect those values back to me. And if they're not perfect and if they're not doing good, then I've got a problem. Or I've got parents who are very pragmatic in their way of doing things, and they've got this deeply emotional child that loves to be in dark spaces and really kind of revel. And the parents are like, oh my gosh, like what's happening with my child? There's just there's too much emotion here. Let's get it to the doctor. Or the soccer dad who's got a child who just loves to read. I want to get my son more extrovert and on the soccer field. And so these pressures can be placed upon kids where they don't really feel that they can show up in their natural way. So in the work that I do, the first place I start is always with the parents. And I use the Enneagram with the parents. So I have a couples report. And I first start working with the parents to kind of see, okay, what personalities do you have? What values of that do you want to transfer to your kids? But where does it also get stuck? Right. So I'll give you an example. When my son was in primary school, he was in the A team swimming. I'm a type 3 on the Enneagram, which is the competitive achiever, right? And my son comes home with a B team slip to the gala. I'm like, what are you? I'm like ready to charge in that school. Like, how very dare you tell me my child is not on the A team? And he's like, it's fine, Mom, it's fine. So I'm like, okay. I'd like, the guy's only 7 years old. It's not like he's ready to go to the Olympics. You know what I'm saying? And he had his gala and he came home and he said, Mom, that was the best gala I've ever had. There was no pressure. I swam every race. I didn't have to be the best at one race. I want to stay in the B team. And I was like, wow, look at how much I was sitting in my projection at that moment of like, that's my pain. It's not your pain. And his father, who's a perfectionist, when the boys would come home with like 70%, he'd be like, great, 70% is wonderful. He is a type 1 strict perfectionist. 70 is wonderful. Where's the other 30? you know, so like pressure, pressure, pressure. And we actually got to the point in high school where my son was struggling so much. And because it was pressure, be the best, pressure, be the best. And we realized, hang on, like we've done everything and parents do everything. We had the psychologist, educational psychologists, we had the extra support at school, we had all of that groovy stuff. And we were thinking, we just can't get this kid, this horse to the water. And when we actually stood back and said, okay, what else do we actually need to include in this? And we were like, we're not including enough gentle love in this process. We're not including creativity in this process. We're not listening to what this guy really needs in order to feel like he can show up fully. And that's one of the big reasons why I've brought Enneagram into parenting and kids, is because if we are not self-aware, if we don't know where our hiccups are, and we can't identify when our personality spiral and what that looks like, or when we're kind of fixed in this one lens, that we see the world through this lens, then we're not creating the space, that free space for our children to roam and self-discover. And it also kind of with the teenagers and like late, I would say your grade 9s, 10s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, where I've used it so much is, you know, how do you know what you want to do until you know who you are? And, you know, so many, I think you would have also seen many friends going through the years. I had a client that spent 7 years in med school and became a pilot. You know, because the parents just thought, no, you're going to be a pilot, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a this, you're going to be a that. And they spent all these years just to find out this is not me at all. And that's not to say that it's wasted time. Every learning is a learning opportunity. But, you know, learning who we about ourselves is something that when I'm working at execs and C-suites over the US and whatever, and they're discovering themselves, they're like, oh my gosh, that's why I do what I do. That's why I fall into that hole and get into this kind of trouble. So I'm not talking about the parents losing their value system or losing the boundaries and their discipline ethics. What I'm saying is that we're making a space for also the values, because our children are also born with a set of their own individual values, that we make space for those values to become part of the family soup, if you want to put it that way. And I can honor what they need and create space for that to arise as well. So
And
that's
I go back just a
yes,
couple
go
of
for it.
steps, Michelle. You gave a very good example of your little one who was not really heading in the direction that you were hoping, or not fully heading in that direction. We are taught as coaches that every one of us ultimately is a product to a large extent of our upbringing, our social circumstances, the people who we associate with from a very young age. That would be family and parents and siblings and so forth. So, just how much of who we are is hidden? You
Yeah,
know,
that's
how do we find who we really are? Because when you have a young child that's deciding they don't want to play soccer, but they'd rather sit at home and read a book, yet dad is a soccer coach and brother is in the first team soccer, what part of that? I'm just trying to understand, how do we know who we really are? Because if who we are is based on what's going on around us, I'm finding that a little bit challenging. Do you think that we are born with a certain set of these things that are hardwired and that's who we are? Or is it all shaped from the exterior?
that is such an awesome question. So it's both nature and nurture. You know, we are born with in a certain way. I mean, I've got 2 kids. They came out the same chute, and I tell you, they are 2 very different individuals, right? So we're born with a certain personality, but we are shaped, of course, by the circumstances that are around us. And each personality type could have the same outward, could experience the same event, but because of how my lens is fixed through my personality type, I may see that as, oh, that didn't really bother me, and another person might say that really impacted me a lot. So this is why with all of the tools that I use, the Enneagram still comes in here, because you've all done the Enneagram here, and we know that we can't tell a person just by their personality type. Beneath that is where the core wounds are, where the defense mechanisms are, where the blind spots are, and they're very unique to each type. And if we know that about our children, we've got a map on how to develop them within their own personality. And also with the couples report, you know, if we've got parents that are in an unhealthy union, that's also going to trickle down. So the Enneagram couples report puts partner and partner side by side, says this is who you are together. How do you have conversations about parenting, finance, communication? How do you have, you know, challenging conversations? How do you talk about, you know, these kinds of things? So we're giving the parents skills to have rich conversations that children can observe, which helps them to learn good, healthy adult conversation. And parents are creating the space that says, look, this is the bubble within which we operate, but I want to see who you are truly. You're allowed to show up without me getting anxious about it. And I feel like in doing so, we give them the best opportunity to show up as their true selves as soon as possible, and we can celebrate. And we also can alleviate the tension that we might have of parents' expectation on kids when they're really not wired that way. And, you know, Paul, to your point as well, you know, when our kids are very little, they may not be soccer players, but you know, my kids, when they were that little in grade school and whatever, I was like, you just give everything a try. Just give everything a try. You don't know what you don't know. Go play a bit of soccer, a bit of cricket, go sing in the choir, go, there's a buffet. And come back and tell me what each one was like. Because of course, there are some children that might be a little bit, you know, daunted, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going into the school and I'm going to go, and we can support them and say, just try, have fun, without the pressure, without the expectation, taking that completely off the board, and reflect on how much am I wanting the external, as Paul, you were mentioning, the external assessment of how my child is doing that reflects on me. Oh.
Sorry, I think Zoom just kicked us out.
I'm sorry, folks.
I don't know what happened. Michelle, I have a quick question.
Sorry about that, folks.
I quickly want to find out, so how does one get balance? Because, you know, in terms of letting them become the person that they are supposed to be, and then, like you said earlier, your boundaries and discipline, you know, and so forth. How does one find that balance? If I use my own daughter as an example, so she's 11 years old, and when you said, you know, the dark, you know, and you are speaking, you know, about my daughter. She loves, you know, if she likes pictures online, it is about piercings and tattoos and dark clothes and stuff. And I'm like, okay, you're 11. So now you're thinking, okay, how do you allow them to be who they are? But also in terms of boundaries, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm judgmental. I don't know. But
that's very often, that arises very, very often when children are starting to individuate. They're starting to see themselves as different to their peer group, different to what, you know, the world dictates. And this often comes through with Enneagram type 4s who want to be unique and different. And when we know that, if I know that my child is coming through with the Enneagram type 4 personality, then I know. And here's the thing, if we've got children that are so deep in their emotions and we're like, oh, I'm like walking the other way, I don't know what's going on. They actually feel so much rejection that it actually makes them spiral even deeper into their emotions. As opposed to acknowledging and saying, I see your uniqueness, and I accept you, and walk away. Because they are going to grow out of it. Or they may not.
Or they may not.
My son's girlfriend's parents are literally at like rock bands and goth swimming parties. Have you ever heard of a gothic pool party? They
Oh
are
my
in
God.
the UK at every single concert, every single weekend. But when they're in that emotional state, to sit with that and honor like your emotions matter. And I think that's a big part, you guys, of why we as coaches are in the place that we are in. We have been taught our whole lives to do the human doing and not the human being. You listen to your brain, you don't listen to your heart. And the heart has so much intelligence in it. Our guts have so much intelligence in it. And if we can impart those life lessons, these are going to be CEOs that have a skill set second to none. So that's so when it comes to the balance that you were referring to, Mareka, it's like I said, this is not about this whole soft parenting. Oh, let the kid be, let him run free, and that's just going to drive everybody mad. It is still within the confines of the values that you have established for your family. But within that space, there has to be a space for everybody to express themselves individually. The other side of this is if you're giving me a child or a teenager that you say, listen, this child needs to be more confident and more assertive. You know, they're too withdrawn, they're too laid back. We need to work on confidence and asserting themselves. I'll say to the parents straight out, okay, so when you're sitting at the dinner table and this teenager says, I don't feel like eating now, I'll eat later when I'm hungry. Are you going to sit and go, okay? Or are you going to say, I beg your pardon, sit down at the table with the family? You asked for an assertive, confident kid. Are you prepared to parent a confident and create that space for respectful, confident assertiveness within the household? Because if you're not ready for that, then why am I going to coach him? There's no space for that to happen. So
we don't look at it that way.
The whole system, in terms of nurturing child's true nature, we number one have to create a safe space for them to do it, because they're going to stumble in their journey to discover themselves. They're going to make mistakes, just like we did. We want to determine, their true nature. And that is, if you think of it, when we look at our kids, how we perceive them as opposed to how their friends perceive them, as a way their teachers perceive them, multi-dimensional aspects to these kids. So doing questionnaires that really land personality, that we can work on those, as Paul was saying, those elements beneath what we see from a personality standpoint, and know ourselves at such a deep level. That's it. First of all is self-understanding. And to Paul's point, when I know myself that well, I start looking at the world and seeing my value from the inside out and not waiting for the outside in to validate me. And that's when you've got super self-empowerment, because let's face it, you could be doing cartwheels across the field and nobody would be standing up and giving you a standing ovation. Right? So we can do as much as we want, but that's not going to guarantee that people are going to sit and applaud you and see you as a valuable person. So it's about knowing that there's only one me, and only I do it this way, and I'm freaking amazing, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. And so from a family point of view, working with the whole system, I really think it's useful. And of course, readiness for what do you want to do in life? Now that you know who you are and you really know yourself really well, in what career do you think your heart would sing? And I'd also want to put it out there that even if you don't, your heart doesn't sing in the first job, for very few people does it ever sing in the first job. But knowing who you are not is just as valuable as knowing who you are.
Yeah, I've always said that to my children. Well, not children anymore. My daughter's 19, my son's 21 going 22. I've always said that many of these experiences that we have in life, whether it's doing things or meeting people, the lesson is more about learning what you don't want rather than what you do. And those are things I think that people often discard and don't give thought to. But all those terrible experiences ultimately lead you to be where you want to be, because you've learned
Correct.
what you don't want.
It's so true. And that's the polarity, right? Like, oh no, I don't want to do that. But actually, that is the path to what you actually want.
I have
Totally.
a question just briefly, Michelle, and I think this is a long rabbit hole that we could go down, or a deep rabbit hole, so I don't want us to do that. But
Mhm.
to what extent are you finding that external factors, by way of how the world is operating these days, is influencing us? Because I only need to look at what I see in the news, which I try not to consume, on any social media platform, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And I find it deeply concerning. I'm glad that my children are actually not really children anymore. And I shudder to think of how young parents are raising young children in this world, because there seems to be so much external influence, way more than there ever was when we were young, and certainly more than when my children were really young. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that at the moment?
Ah, geez. Yeah, like you said, this is a rabbit hole we could really go down. If we think about it, when we were young, a gajillion years ago, our entertainment was at the playing tennis in the streets and watching a little bit of TV during the day. When cell phones came through, even when my kids were in grade school, it was very rare to see a grade 1 or grade 2 with a cell phone. Now we've got kids who are in nursery school on smartphones already playing games and so on. And so if we think of what the influence that youngsters are under these days, parents don't stand a chance really in being able to influence, because they're being influenced before they get out of bed. They're being influenced all day at school. They're being influenced on social media in the afternoons. And so for me, I know that it's almost, our children feel like maybe we're like cutting off a leg if we say, right, there is screen time. But even now, to this point where we're moving on to AI, where they now have stopped even thinking for themselves. I can later on, I can just do this report and do that. And so from a face-to-face social standpoint, I'm very concerned about where this generation is going to go. Our generation has kind of stood on both sides, right? We had the social interaction because we didn't have, before the internet, and now post-internet, we've got a set of those skills. But I'm very concerned about the impact that it's going to have in terms of human connect, when I'm really just seeing the world through a lens and I'm allowing the world to dictate who I am, and how intelligent the AI is getting, and their opportunities moving forward. I'm sure they'll navigate it in some shape or form. But Paul, I'm so with you on that. And I just feel that if parents could stand their ground and say, right, you've got, especially with the youngsters, and say, you've got an hour's screen time and you're not on socials, because these socials, like you said, the stuff that comes through on socials, and most of it is nonsense. People read on Facebook and they go, well, it must be true. It's like, are you serious? Like, not most of the time it's really not. Or Instagram, should I say. We're the older ones, we call them Facebook. I was in a class the other day and I said, oh no, you might have seen this on Facebook. And this guy turns around and said, we were born in the night. We're 90s kids, Michelle. We Insta. I'm like, okay, fine. So Insta it is.
But I
But
think the point is, whatever the platform, you run the risk of that influence. And I think that's where, as parents and teachers and coaches and family members, we really do have a responsibility to step up. And
yeah,
and I'm sorry, it might come across as offensive to other family members, but I think we have a role to play, specifically in our own families and close friends, to say, listen, your children that are 6 and 7 and 8 years old and are spending all their time on their tablet or their phone, or you need to do something about that. I'm waving the flag going, hello, can you see what you're doing? Because I'm sure that we were all guilty of that as parents in some way. But
yeah,
I think very often you're so close to these things that you don't see them. When
yeah,
your child comes home and tells you about everybody at school is on Insta and TikTok and whatever the platform is, and everyone's using Chat GPT, well, then that becomes the norm. And I think
yeah,
that's where we need to have some caution, is to say, okay, well, these are our family values and morals, and this is how we do things. And what the world perceives to be normal is not necessarily our normal. And those
Correct.
are sometimes very difficult conversations to have. But I think you've
Yeah.
got to have them. If you're in a position to have them and you don't, you're almost just as at fault.
Yeah, 100%. And so the process that I go through with doing the questionnaires with the couple, doing the questionnaire with the individual, and then following on with the coaching is key. And, you know, the sooner you can get that laid down, the better. And also what I would add to what you said, Paul, is that also let's take a look at why this is so prevalent in the youngsters with their tablets. Mom and dad get some nice quiet time. Give you the tablet, now we can sit down and we can have a chat with our friends. And no, put the wine down, go and do something with your child, because it just makes life so much easier. Oh no, they're upstairs playing their games, and before you know it, and we've seen some of these kids that like are playing games 12 hours or through the night, you know, and they're communicating. I mean, my youngest is on, he plays games. He's just graduated with a digital design degree, so it does work. But I mean, he'll play with games. He's got mates that are in Ireland and this and that, and they're having a good old chat, but they never see each other. And so that's what I'm really concerned about, is where we're connecting so much on screen that we're not getting the human connection. And we know that it's different between, you know, coaching online and coaching with a person, having that human energy in place and being present with that person is a completely different experience.
And I think
And
AI,
technology is drawing us further apart.
I was going to add to that. Yeah, AI, I think, is taking us to a point where it's going to be almost impossible to discern between a real human and AI. I mean, I saw
Yeah,
something come up the other day on one of my social feeds. I couldn't believe it. I didn't go into it because I have no desire to, but it's essentially an AI partner inverted commas, that will do whatever you want. So in this case, it was a pretty looking lady that came up on the screen, and it was basically like, "Hi, I'm your AI virtual assistant, and you can tell me whatever you want me to do." And they were showing you in this little clip some the audio wasn't playing, but they had the subtitles coming up. It was saying, the user said, for instance, "Give yourself a hug," and you see this a very suggestive hug, I might add. This AI lady now gives herself a sexy hug. Don't look at my hug as being sexy, because it isn't. And then the user says, "Put on some lipstick," and you see this AI model putting lipstick on.
yeah,
And I'm not joking. I mean, I would think I'm fairly astute. But looking at that, if you had taken that out of the context of it being an advert for an AI app, if you had shown me that, I would have believed that that was a real human being doing those things.
yeah,
And we are still at the very, very beginning, at the
yeah,
tip of the iceberg of AI. So,
absolutely.
so one of my concerns is, yes, have these human connections, and they are very important and powerful. And as we are connecting now, albeit behind a laptop screen, my concern is, I reckon within a matter of a year or two, perhaps less, you are going
Yeah,
to be interacting with someone who you believe to be human, but they won't be. I mean,
yeah,
this is like movies that we grew up watching in the early 90s, these futuristic films where you think that, that'll never happen. I think we're
yeah.
living in an age where it's happening right now.
I mean, remember we were watching Star Trek and thinking, oh, you can't just walk up to a door and it slides open.
Yeah, yeah.
um, but absolutely true. But to your point, Paul, and here's the other thing for that parents don't realize they need to do, is that they need to learn what their kids are using. They need to get their skills up on AI. They need to have an Instagram account. They need to know how to be, because how are you going to set parameters if you don't know how what they are doing works? I mean, we had a huge effort at one of the schools I was working with, where we gave all the teachers these like iPads to use that would go onto the electronic whiteboard. Great system, never got used. The teachers had like one workshop, and they just, because they'd always been going, open the book to page 85, write down this paragraph. And that was how they taught for yonks and yonks and forever and forever. And the kids knew the technology better than the teachers did. And so the teachers just felt so intimidated that they just reverted back to their old way of teaching, which we know is not the way this generation learns.
Sure.
So
As they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Not to say that all of these things are enemies, but you can view them as potential threats, I think. You know, AI is fabulous. I was using it just last night to assist me with some scripting.
yeah,
Excuse me. And it offers fabulous tools. I'm sure in every industry there is value to be had. But
correct.
when we get to the point, as you mentioned earlier, where youngsters are relying on it wholeheartedly without question, I think we're on a slippery slope. And maybe that's a conversation for another day for us
Yeah.
as Coaches Network South Africa, is maybe we should find somebody who is coaching in the AI space, Mareka, because I think there are some really good conversations to be had there.
And think when you do get to that stage, bring the question of what the impact is on brain development when it's brought in at such an early stage. Because if the brain doesn't need to think about these things, we're going to have a lot of very ignorant adults and emotionally, no emotional
Unintelligent.
awareness,
The
no
thing is,
self.
what really concerns me is that there will be a loss of imagination. And imagination is what gives you the key to ideas and to, you know, create your own sort of footprint or unique,
Actually,
you know. But so when you rely on AI, I mean, how do you use your imagination then? Because
yeah,
you
so true.
it's not your own.
Imagination is almost what makes us human, isn't it? If you think about it, it's the one trait. And I haven't done studies in animals. I'm sure many people have. You know, do animals have an imagination like we do? I don't think they do. They're simply surviving. But you're
Yeah.
quite right. The imagination, that's one of those uniquely human components that makes us who we are. But
So if we bring it
AI
back
is
to the
learning that.
title, they are. And if we bring it back to the title of nurturing your child's true nature, I think, you know, of everything that we've said here, it all kind of falls into, as parents, we need to be conscious of what might be interfering with my child's true nature. Which voice is speaking louder? Is there so much noise going around them that their true nature is actually being impacted by forces that aren't theirs and shaping them in ways that aren't who they truly are? But we as parents need to spend time getting to know that and letting them feel secure in who they are. By 15, 16 years old, they should be individuating. What I mean by that is I see that I'm different. I'm identifying myself as unique. I'm not just swayed by my peers. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. I know my strengths and my challenges. But if there is anything in our child's development that's going to be influencing their ability to see their true nature, that's when our parenting really needs to kick into high gear and say, right, where do I need to limit? What do I need to promote to support this and to nurture it moving forward?
I like the idea of you saying that you got to work with the parents first, because they need to know who they are first before they can impart coaching and guidelines to their children to connect to
Correct.
themselves as well and to become one with the rest of us.
Correct. Yeah, and that's why I use these questionnaires, because when they get it and they read it, they get one report that's got their own personality side by side. And it's got like real life parenting tips, things like, you know, how does this person and this person focus on intimacy or managing money or parenting or communication? And it's like, oh, okay, now if I speak to you like this, then I'm going to get a better result. If we have to have tough conversations, this is how I see it, this is how you see it. And as I said, if we're doing that with parents, they're modeling behavior that instead of me forcing my values, I'm living my values, and the children are able to see what a healthy, interactive relationship looks like, which I think is above and beyond a wonderful gift to give to our kids.
Michelle, I think for the sake of time, we're going to leave it there. But my final question would be for parents who have listened to this and it's resonated. What's the next step?
So the next step, do you mean in terms of getting in contact with me or doing another?
Yeah, I think that the next step in terms of reaching out to you and learning from clearly what you have learned and your experiences, because I personally I think there are many people in this position, and it's always great saying yes, cool, we understand that, we're seeing that in our home, but the challenge is what are we actually going to do about it?
Got you. So I do run free talks once every 2 months on areas of this very topic. So it's a free online workshop that I offer to parents and to teachers, because teachers must also have the same framework, right? If I'm a teacher and I think you must be perfect and you must be right, and you've got a kid that's just like a 7 who's up and about, he can't sit still. This kid's getting blamed and shamed as not concentrating, being disruptive in class, because I just want little children to sit on their little seats and just listen to everything I say. So this child's going to get blamed and named and shamed. So with teachers as well. So I have every 2 months, I do a workshop. And if you're interested in getting in on that, you can contact me on michelle@skillset.co.za, or you can check out my LinkedIn profile at Skillset Coaching and Training.
Wonderful. Skill set coaching and training.
Yeah.
And I know, Mareka, you always pop these links in the description of the video, hey?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I will.
Well, thank you for having me, everybody. It's been a delight to see you all again.
Likewise. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for imparting your knowledge. It's always lovely. I think as parents, it's great to be able to resonate with what you're saying and get a feel for the page that you're on. And thank you for taking the time not only to chat with us today, but just generally what you're doing in life. Youth or the youth is our future. It really is. And I think if more people had the genuine concern that you appear to have for youth, the world ultimately is going to be a better place. We need to get out of our bubbles and crawl out from behind our high walls and actually take note of what's going on in the world with young people, because if we don't get it right, we are going to have a terrible retirement. We're going to be living in a world at an old age that is really not nice. I mean, it's not nice now, but I think there's still something we can do about it, and that includes having people like you around. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much.
That concludes the coaching hour. To my colleagues and friends, Mary and Mareka, thanks as always, ladies, for your time, and thank you for joining us for the coaching hour, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.